we will now start our regularly scheduled part of our program.
Norm, I'm trying to bring order to this chaos already.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to figure out which is the regular and which is the warm-up. But we have Marc Elias, who is the premier election attorney in the country. Let's take a little step back. The maps that are currently in effect in Texas, in your view, do they represent a fair apportionment as they are now? Forget about the new ones. And what have they done to minority representation in Texas, the current state of the maps?
Yeah, so the current maps in Texas are a wild gerrymander. They are an obscene gerrymander. And they were enacted in 2021 to be an effort to deny minority voting rights, particularly Hispanic representation, which, a lot of the population growth, we talk a lot about how Texas has gained seats and because of population growth. The overwhelming majority of that population growth has been because of minority voting rights. And both after the 2010 census and reapportionment and drawing maps, and then in 2020 when they drew it in 2021, the Republicans of Texas have done everything they can to deny minorities their proper opportunity to elect candidates of choice. So they've been being sued, including by me and my law firm. They've been being sued for the last 5 years. And so to now watch them say we need to gerrymander is like taking an obscene gerrymander and making it a grotesquely obscene gerrymander, which distinguishes it from the nonsense that Tom DeLay did in the mid 1990s, which I was also involved in, where they did mid-cycle redistricting. But their argument was, look, Democrats under Ann Richards had drawn the maps one way. We want, now that we have power in the mid-cycle, to draw another way. I thought that was wrong. I thought the Supreme Court shouldn't allow it. But it was a different thing. What we are watching in Texas now is really unprecedented. We have never had a state that gerrymandered aggressively and illegally, and then decides in the middle of the cycle to go back and do more.
Yes. Now, the map that they are contemplating has not gotten through because the Democrats have broken quorum. They've left. How bad could this get? In other words, how many seats could Republicans abscond with, and what would happen to the minority representation then? They already get like 80% of the seats. What would it be in their brave new world?
Yeah, so what they are proposing is a map that would basically net Republicans 5 more seats. So it would flip 5 more seats in an already wildly skewed map from being Democratic to Republican, and it would obviously therefore have a very negative impact on the ability of minority voters to elect their candidates of choice. And what they are counting on is that they will do this, and yes, there will be litigation, but the litigation will take so long that they will be able to get away with it at least for 2026, while this works its way through the courts. And so, look, this is Trumpism at its natural conclusion in politics. We've seen the natural conclusion of Trumpism in policy, grabbing people off the street, disappearing them, sending them to foreign gulags, the cruelty there. This is just the extension of that to politics.
Absolutely.
Marc, tell us a little bit about your view, then I'll offer some thoughts on the authoritarianism represented by the squeeze, the bogus quo warranto lawsuit that even the AG Paxton disagrees with.
That's the best part.
But also now there's this complete BS bribery investigation for Beto's organization making routine political contributions. What do you make of that authoritarian playbook at the state level, particularly with Cornyn saying he wants to get the FBI involved?
Yeah, the Republicans were like in a in a frenzy to see who could say the most outrageously unconstitutional thing the other day, right? You had the governor of Texas saying, "I'm going to go straight to the Supreme Court and try to have these seats declared vacant," right? So that essentially 50 plus third of the seats of the House would all of a sudden become vacant because Democrats have broken quorum. Okay, you had that nonsense going on. Then you had Ken Paxton saying, "Oh no, Governor Abbott, you don't get to do that. I get to do that." Right. So you had this like intramural skirmish between Paxton and Abbott over whose lawsuit gets to be the most unconstitutional paragraph. And then the senator, who is of course facing a primary from Paxton, he's like, "I got to get into this action. So I'm just going to say the most preposterous thing available, which is the FBI ought to go to Illinois and like kidnap these people." I mean, it's insane that this is the way they're talking. But again, Norm, to your point, this is just an extension of what we've seen. We have been watching the weaponization of government. We have watched as they have used the power of the government to try to intimidate and go after their political opponents, two of whom are actually speaking to each other right now. Both you and I, Norm, have been targeted by name by this White House, by executive action.
Jen, you must be doing something wrong if the president hasn't attacked you in a speech at the Department of Justice.
I just put you on the page. I am just an enabler.
But you have that, and then let's not forget the throwing of a U.S. senator to the ground, Senator Padilla. What happened in New York with the New York City Comptroller? Frankly, the indictment that is still pending in New Jersey against Congressman MacIver is an absolute outrage that we shouldn't forget. The arresting of a judge in Wisconsin, right?
Hannah Dugan.
Anna Dugan, Miles Taylor, and Chris Krebs, that executive order. Like, we shouldn't be surprised that this is happening. And of course, most recently, the suggestion that somehow that President Obama and the Obama administration should be prosecuted under what theory? Who the fuck knows?
Mark, other thing
Jen,
can
I just want to put a chapeau on that. Don't forget the attack on the union leader in California, David Huerta. He's also been charged. In addition to that, the attack on unions generally. Yep. The administration went to the Ninth Circuit and lied. They say we're not going to implement the executive order, and they today are tearing apart the VA unions. This is a full-on assault. What Marc has described, it's a full-on assault on all of the pillars of a free society: judges, members of Congress, and unions, the press, and now. And then I'll pass back to Jen. And now they're getting states involved. So it's not enough to do it at the federal level. They're co-opting their autocratic allies. Fortunately, the contrarians are pushing back, supporting over 100 legal actions that we've undertaken. All right, back to you, Editor-in-Chief.
Marc, I want to ask you about two other things they're trying. First are these letters that are going out to the states demanding the entire voter files, which contain all kinds of information, including social security numbers and the rest. What are they up to, and do they have any legal basis for this? I think I know the answer to the second one. And next, what is happening with Section 2, which is the last little remnant of the Voting Rights Act? And what do you think the Supreme Court's going to do to that part of our voting rights legal framework?
Okay, let me sound a really loud alarm bell around your first question. If we were not dealing with Texas right now, the thing I would be telling people is that is the most important political story around free and fair elections is what the Department of Justice is doing. The Department of Justice has been first quietly, and then they've been outed, and now they've admitted publicly they are going to all 50 states and seeking copies of the state's voter file. Now, what does that mean? That is a list of every registered voter in the state. It includes their address. It includes your social security number. It may include, will include your date of birth. It may include your race. In many states, it includes whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, whether you voted in one primary or another, whether you voted in a general election or not. It is highly, highly sensitive information. And this is being requested by, in many instances, according to the democracy docket reporting that my team has done, by the criminal division, not by civil lawyers, but by federal prosecutors. The people who are supposed to be keeping us safe, the people who are supposed to be, prosecuting drug kingpins, they are collecting this information. Now, you ask yourself, why? Why does the Trump Justice Department want a national list of every voter? They want to know where Jen Rubin is voting. They want to know her polling place. They want to know her social security number. They want to know that whether she's a registered Democrat or Republican. Why do they want that? Well, at the best possibility, and this is like our best hope, right? Our best hope is that it's because they want to misuse it to spread disinformation. Okay, that's like the opening table stakes. The worst is that they are going to use this to interfere in the 2026 and potentially later in the 2028 election by either forcing or trying to themselves engage in mass voter purges, using it as a pretext to seize voting equipment, to disqualify voters, or to tamper with the vote count. If this sounds fanciful, go back and read what Donald Trump tried to do with Jeffrey Clark and others in the post-election in 2020. Now, it was stopped because actually the Republican Justice Department wouldn't go along with it. But there was a real effort to get involved with and overturn the results of a free and fair election. And I am very, very worried about that.
Exactly. And tell us a little bit about the fate of Section 2, which the Supreme Court seems to be taking another whack at, having dismantled Section 5.
Yeah. So when Shelby County came down in 2013, this is the case that gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which was really kind of, in many respects, its most core provision. Justice Roberts, the chief who wrote an opinion, made a point of saying nothing in this opinion affects the nationwide application of Section 2, which is the remaining provision that really protects minority voters, particularly in redistricting, but also in voting more generally. And he made that assurance because he knew there was outrage over what he was doing over Section 5. Well, here we are now in 2025, and the Supreme Court had a case last term brought by white voters in Louisiana who were claiming that the state of Louisiana enacted a map that was discriminated against them. So I just want you to take that all in. Their concern was that the Republican legislature in Louisiana drew a map that was too favorable to black voters and discriminating against white voters. So these white voters challenged that map. It went to the Supreme Court, and we all waited till the last day of the term to see what would happen. And lo and behold, we didn't get an opinion. Instead, we got an order saying that the case would be rebriefed and re-argued next term on a different set of questions. And now we have those questions. And they go to the heart of whether or not Section 2 is still constitutional. Essentially, the court wants to know whether or not when a legislature remedies a violation of Section 2, in other words, when the state draws additional minority opportunity districts because they are required to by Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, whether that offends the Constitution's sort of race blindness, right? The same theory you see the Department of Justice using elsewhere. And therefore, Section 2 would be unconstitutional. It would strike down the remaining protections that minority voters have in voting rights, in redistricting, and it is something that we need to pay really, really close attention to because, Jen, I am sure you remember the last time the Supreme Court did this maneuver where it heard argument and then ordered re-argument. That case was Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, where the conservative majority said, we heard the arguments, but we think we can do more damage. so let's have it re-argued on a broader question, and then we'll issue our ruling.
And
Marc,
this, Mark, is why I and others have come to the conclusion that as much of a threat as Donald Trump is to democracy and the rule of law, John Roberts and the right-wing MAGA majority is just as bad. And that when Democrats return to power, if we're able to have elections and able to return to power, that Supreme Court reform, meaning redesign, meaning expansion of the court, meaning term limits, has to be on the agenda because the damage they have done to our entire constitutional structure, separation of powers, executive power, one man, one vote, has been devastating. And these people have done more damage to the Constitution than any court in history. And I would include Taney and the Dred Scott court.
Marc, just a couple questions from the chat and the viewers. They want to know what can be done. what can be done about this effort to get data, what can be done about Section 2. Um, our secretaries of state and AGs have been fighting back on the first, and you and I have been in court fighting back on the administration's election predations. Just before we turn to the favorite part of the conversation, what we're looking forward to. Don't limit yourself to politics and law, Mark. Give our viewers, if you can, if it's accurate and true, some encouragement what they can do, what can be done about these issues.
Yeah. So on the first one, there's a lot that can be done. As you point out, there are a number of attorneys general and secretaries of state that have told the Department of Justice to pound sand. That's their right under the Constitution. The Constitution gives the states, not the federal government, primary responsibility for administering elections in this country. And the Department of Justice itself has no role, even where there are places for the administration to act. It is the criminal division of the Department of Justice that has no role in administering elections. So we need to, as citizens, everybody here needs to be calling and contacting and otherwise supporting attorneys general, secretaries of state, their state legislators, their governors, telling them to stand up and fight against this authoritarian power grab. And that is in both states where Democrats run the process, run the elections, and in states where Republicans do, right? Like Republicans used to be big believers in federalism and separation of powers and the importance of states standing on their own rights. So we need to keep the pressure up and not let this fall off the radar screen. DOJ thought they'd be able to do this quietly, and it was only because it got exposed that people even know about this. So that's one thing. On Section 2, you're exactly right. We have to do a couple of things. First of all, I'm proud my law firm's involved in the Louisiana case now. That's continuing to percolate through the Supreme Court. But we need to continue to press in court the importance and the continued vitality of these voting law protections, and we cannot back away from those fights. We have to continue to have them as citizens. One thing you can do is you can call Congress. Congress almost passed the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and it didn't because not a single Republican in the House voted for it. Now it still got through the House, but then it got filibustered in the Senate. And so the thing you can do is, as a pro-democracy voter, you can tell your elected officials that where they stand on voting rights is as important to you as anything else, and that you expect that they are going to stand with the voters and with voting protections.
Absolutely. So now we do go to our favorite part of the program, which is what are you looking forward to? Norm, what are you looking forward to?
Well, Jen, as you can see, I am on the road. I do pull over for coffee with the Contrarians. In the early days when it was really frenetic and we were filing all those cases, sometimes I'd be talking to y'all and running into a courthouse. I am headed to California. I'm going to work on our cases with the wonderful organization LULAC and our colleague Juan Proano. We're going to work on the next wave of immigration related litigation. So stay tuned. We'll have more to say about that, and I'll be speaking at the LULAC National Convention out in California.
Wonderful. Marc, what are you looking forward to?
So, many of you who follow politics know that August is oftentimes the month that we learn just how bad things are politically for the party in power. Congress goes home, it does town halls, it sees constituents, and so I have been watching as Republican members of Congress are getting heckled and shouted down, and I think that this is really it is important that in this month of August, while they're on break, that everyone, whether it's attending a hearing around redistricting in Texas, which was really effective, I thought, the public testimony, whether it's going to town halls, whether it's writing letters to the editor, whether it's going to protests. I'm really watching August because as goes August, believe it or not, as tends to go the rest of the next year. So that's sort of what I'm looking forward to. The other thing I'm looking forward to, if I can just say, is continuing to read the Contrarian. I am thrilled. That's the great work I'm thrilled with the great work you do. Norm's exactly right. I was an advocate for Norm's and you all starting pro-democracy independent media, and I think that anyone who reads you all now and sees what has happened, whether, Jen, it's your former employer at the Washington Post or some of the others, you really see the difference, right? You can see the difference in what it means where you are getting the unfiltered, unvarnished truth, and that's what it is. It's every bit as truthful as what the legacy media says they are doing. What it is, though, it is unapologetic. It's not trying to find a way to be nice to the authoritarians. So that's the other thing I'm looking forward to. I am a paying subscriber to the Contrarian, and I encourage everyone else out there to be one as well.
Thank you, Marc. We love you, and not just because you say nice things about you, but we do love when you say nice things about us. I am looking forward to the continued spine sniffing, stiffening, punch throwing Democratic response to Texas. You have Gavin Newsom, you have Kathy Hochul, you have those brave Texas Democrats who have fled to break quorum. You have advocates in Texas, a great group, Texas for All. That's number 4 all, who are operating on the ground. This is what Marc and Norm and I have been saying all along. It's not enough just to cower or make speeches or plead for some kind of deal. You have to punch them in the nose, metaphorically speaking, and you have to fight back, and you have to fight fire with fire. And last week, we've finally, I think, seen the culmination of months of organizing, of pressure from the base, from voices from people like Marc and Norm, to galvanize this kind of effort. And for once, Democrats are in fighting form. So I am proud of them. I want to encourage them. You know what? You can also just pick up the phone, call your Democratic representative, Democratic governor, and say thanks. They get tons of hate mail and hate calls and hate emails. They need to balance it out, and it does help. It does support them. And you can also support the effort in Texas by supporting Beto O'Rourke's group and the brave lawmakers out there. So, Marc, thank you so much. I had so much fun talking to you. It's just like old times when we used to just get on the phone and shoot the breeze about the downfall of democracy. But now we're fighting back. So thank you both. Thank you, Contrarians, for everything you do. You make what we do possible. So have a great day. And Coffee with Contrarians will be back next week. We'll see you later. Have a great day.
Bye.